Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening. Or good night, wherever you are on planet Earth. After doing further contemplation and meditation, it occurred to me that I should include another variable in my formula. If you have been following me, you know that I am dealing with and exploring and studying the formula E equal mc squared, which was an advocation of Albert Einstein, a nuclear scientist. But as I said again, if you have been following me, you know that I'm trying to develop a formula that will that actually confronts Einstein's theory of E equal mc squared, and that I have isolated several variables. In fact, I have isolated three variables, which I am using to construct my formula. To review, those three variables are I for infinitive, C for communication, and L for love and compassion. But after really thinking about my formula, see, my formula, the formula that I'm trying to discover that already exists in nature is a formula which would show how mankind cannot be totally destroyed, even though mankind is quite mischievous. I just came up with another variable, and I think it's essential for my formula. That variable is M. M. M for morality. I think that's essential. If we're going to be talking about humanity, I don't see how we cannot talk about the concept of morality. So, unlike Einstein's theory, his summary, which is E equal mc squared, where he used three variables, and I thought that maybe I should try to construct or identify a formula in nature with three variables. But after further consideration, I think that I need another variable in my formula, and that variable is M for morality. Morality. I think that if I'm going to use that variable M for morality, I must also define that variable, morality. What is morality? I think that morality is a concept that mankind designed as a way of conducting ourselves as we interact with our fellow human beings. I think morality has something to do with not necessarily what is right and what is wrong, but if we're dealing within a culture, we're dealing with what the culture thinks is right, and what the culture thinks is wrong. And then laws are defined that say, because this is how we think, then this is how we must interact with each other. I think, okay, let's look at the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. I think these were moral laws, laws which were designated for a particular culture. Because if we examine the earth and go to many different cultures, we find that one man may be doing something in his culture which may not be right for my culture. Okay, let's think of the concept of polygamy, having more than one wife. That's not necessarily acceptable in certain cultures. Then, even though it may be peculiar to the Western culture, there are cultures that exist on this earth. There are civil societies that exist on this earth that say children should engage in sexual intercourse. There's a tribe in West Africa where men dress as women to get women. So when we talk about morality, we must also talk about the culture that this idea of morality, where it comes from, where morality is relative, is based on the culture. Maybe how some cultures look at morality. Maybe that is the reason why these cultures are overrun by other cultures. Let's look at the African culture and the European culture. Why was Europe able to come in and just take over Africa? I mean, take over. Here's a group of people from another culture who came to a massive culture, many people. And this culture, we're talking about the European culture, the Western culture. This culture came down to the culture of Africa and just took over, took the lands from the people, took the minerals and food, and enslaved a massive group of human beings. And I think that their concept, those Europeans who came and conquered Africa and ruled Africa, I think their concept of morality may have, excuse the expression, their concept of morality perhaps may have been superior or more superior than the concept of morality as the African had. Why were the Africans conquered? Why were the African people conquered and enslaved and marginalized all over the world? That even today you have the repercussions of the enslavement of the African continent and the African people. So I think that it must have had something to do with the issue of morality. I think that the Africans' idea of morality was the reason why Africa was defeated. And even to this day, look at the African countries where the people are beggars, where the leaders are beggars. Why? Why have the African people and the African continent been put on a level of disgrace? I think it has something to do with morality. I think it has something to do with how we view our fellow man within our social cultures and how we handle legal or social issues based on our idea of morality. I think that that was a failure in African society, which allowed the European to come in and conquer the entire continent. Look at the countries who conquered Africa. Portugal, a small country, a country smaller than the state of Florida in the United States of America, smaller than Florida. And these Portuguese came into Africa and they took lands like Angola, Mozambique. What Africans speak Portuguese? These were former colonies of the Portuguese. And these people come from these small countries in Europe. And they were able to come into Africa and take the lands. The Angola is probably 3, 4, 5 times bigger than Portugal. And that was only one country that the Portuguese were able to take and run. Oh, they went into South America and they took Brazil. Brazil, Portuguese. Wherever the Portuguese language is spoken, that's who the Portuguese conquered. And they come from way up in Europe in these very tiny nations. And they were able to whip black men down, take their livestock, take their land. And even today, the, the remains of Portuguese colonialism still exist in these Portuguese colonies. France, England, they were all. So you must ask the question, how and why was this possible for these Europeans to come into this massive continent with this mass population of people and just take over and rule? We must ask ourselves, why? Well, we could say, well, one thing we know is this, that whatever these Africans were doing, it must have been wrong. Whatever these Africans were doing when the Europeans came and took over Africa and ruled the lands for hundreds of years and took slaves, and slaves worked in America for hundreds of years, and the white man ruled. Why? Why? Why did the white man rule and the black man was enslaved? These are questions. These are the questions that we must ask ourselves. I think that the reason, one of the reasons, and I think the major reasons that the African lost in this struggle of in this power struggle, I think it has something to do with morality. Now, I remember when I first came to Kenya 10, 12 years ago, and I would go to the library at the university, and there were interesting books that you probably would not find in libraries in U.S. But I would go through these books, and these books were written by writers, early writers. I mean, like writers of the 1400s, and some of the. But I would go into the books and read what was happening in Africa prior to Africa becoming, but prior to Africa's enslavement. Yes, there were cannibals in Africa. Yes, homosexuality was widespread in Africa. So I would go into the library and I would read these valuable books that were in the library. I Kenyatta University. I studied at Kenyatta University, and I would go to the library and go get these old volumes written by authors and writers who were writing these books 600, 700, 800 years ago, and they were recording history and the things that I was reading. Cannibalism, yes. Homosexuality, yes. It was widespread in Africa prior to Africa being conquered by the European. So I think that it has something to do with morality. I mean, you don't respect marriage, so adultery. As long as he doesn't find out about it, adultery is okay. These type of attitudes, what are the attitudes in parts of Africa? If my husband doesn't find out about it, and if it's just a general acceptable thing to have, it's okay as long as we can keep it a secret. Adultery. So I think that the reasons why Africa and the African people were enslaved by the European is that acts of immorality. Now, I'm still working on my formula. And after I was pretty thinking and thinking and thinking and contemplating, it came to my mind that I needed another variable in my formula. And that variable was M. And M equals morality. Remember, what I'm trying to do is come up with a formula that counteracts the theory of relativity, which was advocated by Albert Einstein. And any of you who are in science know, I'm sure you've heard of the formula E equal mc squared. Okay, my contention is this, that formula E equal mc squared was just the first step toward the atomic bomb, the bombs of mass destruction. That from this formula, it led to bombs of mass destruction. Well, right now, you have about 10 nations that could totally wipe out humanity because they have nuclear bombs that can kill hundreds of millions of people. One or two bombs could wipe out a nation. And you have several nations that exist on Earth who have that power. So, since I have studied history and I see what man does when he has power, and since man has the power of nuclear weapons, it is my belief that there is some man, somewhere, there's a nation there is someone, a human being, who will push that button and a nuclear war will begin. So the formula that I'm looking for is how do we save mankind, knowing who and what mankind is? This is Musa, Matt Mitchell Jr. signing off.